Okay, today I'm going to cover with you Chapter 4 in Access. Now I realize some of you probably started this already, so you might have to download the file that's in your VUS 235 folder and then open it to make some changes. But I'm going to go ahead and start from the beginning so we make sure that everything is correct. We're going to open Access and choose a blank desktop database. Okay, now normally it tells me to save it. So let me close this and try one more time. Access, blank desktop database. Here we go. This is what I want. Instead of database 2, I'm going to name it with the file name given on page 163 in Access. And it is AL1C4 Hudson. I'm also going to change the folder where it's saved, just in case you have something else that you need to upload when you're completely finished. We want everything to be in the same folder. I'm going to click this Open File Folder button and choose my Downloads folder. Now, as you can tell, I already have a Hudson folder here because I've already done this. So I'm going to save over it, and it probably asked me to replace it. You're not going to get that question. Okay, so now I'm working in Access. I have nothing created. It automatically tries to create a new table for me. We're going to create an employees table, and we're going to do that in Design View. So I'm going to instantly change to Design View. Even though I'm currently in Database View, Data Sheet View, I'm going to change to Design View by just clicking the Design View button. This table is called Employees. Okay, my first field is Employee ID. It is not an auto number. It is short text. Also, the Employee ID field, it tells me in step 2A, is limited to 4 characters. So be sure you're still in the Employee IDs field. It doesn't matter where you are in this row here, as long as you're in the field somewhere. I'm going to change this to 4 characters like it states. Then I have a field name, first name, which is also short text, and it's limited to 20 characters. And it's 20, there we go. Last name, short text, it's also limited to 20 characters. And I don't know why it keeps doing that. Okay. The next field is the address field. It is also short text, and it's limited to 30 characters. Again, that time it worked. The city is short text, but it has a default value of Pueblo. So down in the properties under default value, in that row, in quotation marks, I don't even need to put in quotes when I'm in this way, Pueblo. When I click out of it, it does it for me. So I have my city field. My next new field is state. It's also short text. The default value for that is Colorado, CO, the postal code for Colorado. I'm now on to page 164. You can actually look at the very top, and it tells us all of the fields that we're typing instead of reading the text. The only difference is we're not typing in this description column right here. I think that's unnecessary. So after state, we have the zip, which is also short text. Then we have telephone, which is short text, but we need an input mask. So in this field, I'm going to come down to input mask, click the ellipse. Yes, I want to save my table. My phone number is the input mask I'm choosing for the telephone field. I choose this top radio button because I do want the parentheses and the dash in here. So now I can go to next and then finish. The next field is status. It is also short text. Now, this is going to be a little different. This is something we have not done. So stay with me. I'm in the status field. Down here in the properties, I have 2 tabs, general and lookup. I'm going to click lookup. And in the display control, I'm going to click in there where it says text box. Choose the drop down arrow and choose list box. Right underneath that, it says table query. I'm going to click that drop down arrow and choose value list. Then in the row right beneath it, it says row source. I'm going to choose those ellipses, and I'm going to type the four choices for status, and that's in step 2E. It's full-time, part-time, temporary, and contract. You can choose a default value, but I did that earlier and it didn't work. So there's really no point. I guess I'll try it again. Full-time, we have more full-time employees than any other. So I would only need to change it if it's one of the other three. So click OK, and I'm not guaranteeing that it's going to work. We'll see. Okay, and then our last field is hire date. Make sure you choose date time for that. It's very important. Okay, at this point, we can input all of our data. Yes, we want to save it. Turn to the top of page 165, and you're going to input all of the data down to employee ID 2120. Notice you have a default field. Now, if you're having a problem with that default field, it's because you tried to type data in there before you put your default values in. And when that happens, it creates a big problem. And you're going to have to type it in every time, or you're going to have to delete the record you have already typed to get your default field to work correctly. See how my default for status didn't work? I'm just going to type an F for my full time, but notice I can click my drop down arrow also, and I have my list of 4 choices. I would want a capital F on that. So hire date, I'm not using an input mask, so I have to type those slashes in there. Rosa is a part-time status, so I can click on the drop-down arrow and choose part-time, or I could type a capital P and it would automatically put it in there for me. Okay, so I have a total of 8 records. I went from the first employee ID down to employee 2120. I do need to auto-fit my address column because I can't read everything in there. It's truncated, and I want to be able to see it all. So that's all the data we have for the employees field. So now we're going to make some changes to that on step 6. We're going to switch to design view. Remember, this is a recording, so you can pause, rewind, whatever it is you need to do in case I'm going too fast. So switch to design view. We're going to insert a new row immediately up above first name. So I'm going to click in the gray box to the left of first name, and then I'm going to right click and choose insert rows. Now you also have insert rows up here in the tools group on this design tab, but I'm a right clicker, and this is title. It is short text, but it's limited to 20 characters, so I need to make sure I choose the general tab and limit that to 20 characters. We're also going to delete this hire date field. So even though we typed all of that data, we're going to delete it now. So select the hire date field, click on the gray box to the left of it, right click and say delete row. It's going to say, are you sure you have data in these fields? If you delete this, everything that you just typed in that field will be gone. And we really do want to do this, so click yes. Now we're going to change to data sheet view. Yes, we want to save. Now see, this happened to me earlier. My title field is clear down here on the right hand side. Even though I moved it when I created it above first name, so it should be right here between employee ID and first name. So we're going to move it. Make sure when you move it, you click the name title, and then you click it again and hold down your mouse so you get this heavy line. I had some students who were trying to move this and it was hiding some of their fields. So if by chance that happens, and you have some fields that are gone, what you can do is click the first field and drag. I don't want to move it. I want to click and hold down to select all of these. This is only if you don't have all of your fields showing. I have one student that happened to today. So just in case that happens to you, you can select them all and right click and say unhide fields. Then you can make sure there's a check mark in all of these. And then you could just close. Well, all of my fields are here, so there's nothing to unhide. But I just moved my title field between employee ID and first name. We're also going to move the status field, so it shows up right after employee ID. So it should say employee ID, status, title, first name. Okay, now in the title field on step 10, you see this first column of data, we're adding a title to each employee. So this first one is design director. I usually press my down arrow key, so it takes me to my cell beneath it. It saves me just a little bit of time. Okay, I do need to auto-fit that column, that field, because my production director just didn't quite fit. Now we're getting ready to do something we've not done before as well. We're going to format this table. It's pretty easy. We're going to click the select all button. It's right up here to the left of your field names and right above these gray boxes on the left-hand side. You've got a little arrow there. It's kind of hard to see. But when you click it, it's select all, just like in Excel. On the home tab on the far right, we have text formatting. The book wants us to change our font to Arial. And we want to just choose the very first Arial that shows up. Now you could just type Arial, just like we've done before, and that's fine. And font size number 10. We're also going to change the alternating row colors, which is found right here where my mouse is. Click this drop down arrow, and the book wants us to choose this aqua blue 2. So it's in the standard colors, find the aqua blue column, and go down to the third square, aqua blue 2. So now I'm going to deselect, and you can see that every other line is that aqua blue 2. Now if I select an entire row, it changes to a dark blue color like it did before. But every other line is that aqua blue 2. Okay, we're on step 14 on page 165. We're going to find all occurrences of director and replace them with manager. We're going to use the Find Replace button, just like we've done in Word and Excel. On the Home tab in the Find group, you have the binoculars. Directly to the right of that is Replace. If you accidentally click the binoculars, you can click the Replace tab, and it takes you to the same place as Replace. Okay, so we're going to find a director. Make sure you capitalize it and replace it with manager. But in the match area, we need to click the drop down arrow and choose any part of a field, because when I look up here at my titles, I don't have just one title that says director. And it wouldn't replace them if we didn't say any part of a field. So now we can choose replace all. It did not find, oh, okay. This is my fault, so I'm going to cancel here. I need to be in the title field. I have to click somewhere in this title field. Then I can go to replace. And it's still all in here, so now I can choose replace all. And it's telling me, it made my changes. If I look up here, design director is now design manager, but it's saying you can't undo this. So if you don't like what's done, you can't just use the undo key. And I'm going to say yes, I do want to continue. The next find and replace is find all occurrences of assistant and change it to associate. Now we wouldn't have to choose any part of a field, but because we already did, we're just going to leave it. And we're going to choose replace all. It's going to ask the same question. Notice in your title how assistant changed to associate. Yes, we want to continue. Now we can close this find and replace dialog box, close the employees table, make sure we say yes to save it. Okay, we're moving on to assessment number 2 on page 165. We're going to create this table in design view. You can create it in datasheet view. It is up to you how you do it, but I'm going to do it in design view because there are a few changes I need to make here. You guys are perfectly capable of doing assessment 2 on your own. There is nothing in there that we have not done. So I'm going to do it in design view because I think it's faster. And I'm all about fast. Now, one thing I want you to notice, the project ID field should be the primary key. So I need to go back to my field project ID and be sure I choose primary key. Then I can go on to each one of these fields. And if you're looking at the instructions, and I hope you are, because you should be, going to help you. Be sure anytime you're dealing with a date that the data type is date time, because it will affect you, especially on your test. Last semester I had several students who had a problem because they chose short text for a date, and it tells us right in here it should be date time. Okay, so I have all of my fields. Now I'm going to change to datasheet view. Yes, I want to save projects table. It tells me that in step 1. Now I can type all of my data in here. Be very sure that you key this right, because if you don't, it's going to create some problems for you in the future of this project when we're trying to create relationships. By the way, when you put these records in this table, it doesn't matter so much, but when you put these records in, please go left to right, because it will matter on assessment number 3, because they're with auto number. So it's important that you do that. It is also very important that you get the project ID and the employee ID numbers absolutely correct, so it doesn't create those futuristic problems. And trust me, they will create problems if you don't get them correct. So here is our completed projects table. It's pretty simple. I'm going to close it. Say, if it asks you, say yes. I'm moving on to assessment number 3, and I'm going to create an expenses table. There are some things in here that you have not done, and there are also some special instructions. So please listen carefully to assessment number 3 to the very beginning of it. Once we get through this first part of it, you will probably be able to work the rest of it on your own, as well as assessment 4. But for now, please listen carefully. So create table design. I'm creating the fields it tells me to create. So item ID, it tells me the auto number. It also tells me the item ID needs to be the primary key. So because I'm in design view, it didn't create one for me. I needed to do that. In datasheet view, it's already auto number and it's already a primary key, but I'm not using that. Okay, there we go. Amount is currency, and then there are some changes because it tells me out to the side of there, we need to type a condition in the validation rule property box that states the entry must be $500 or less. So be sure you're in the field name for the amount. You're going to come down to the properties and you see this validation rule. And the validation rule says less than equal to 500. So I'll read that to you again. It says, type a condition in the validation rule property box that states the entry must be $500 or less. So that validation rule is the less than sign equals 500. There are no spaces. You're typing it just like you see it typed on the screen that I just typed. Now right beneath that, we're going to actually put the text that would show up. Notice over here it says the error message that appears when you enter a value prohibited by the validation rule. So in the validation text, you're just going to type this, and I'm just getting that from that little paragraph. It says the entry must be $500 or less. So now we have it in words instead of like a function or with operands, less than equal to 500. So that's our amount field. The next new field is date submitted. Be sure you choose date time for your data type. We're going to put an input mask in here. So input mask in the properties, you know how to do this. Click the ellipse. We're going to choose short date first. We're going to name the table expenses. Short date. There are no changes to this, so we can choose finish. Now I'm going to change to datasheet view, and I'm going to enter my data. Now the thing I need to tell you is when you get to the third record, employee ID 4002, you need to remove them. Do not even include them in this typing at all, because if you do, it's going to mess everything up. We did not include employee ID 4002 in our employees table. We only went down to employee 2120. So it's very important that you don't include that employee in this table either. So for item ID, I just tab through that. It says new, but as soon as we go to the next record, it will change to number 1. So employee ID 1466, code, the project ID code, the expense amount, the date. Now I have a short text input mask here. So you need to type it just like you see it written in pink on page 166. Those zeros. You don't need to type the forward slashes, but you have to put 0904-2015 because we used an input mask. So I press tab through the item ID. I have my second employee ID in here. My biggest error is forgetting to tab through that item ID. Okay, so remember we're skipping the 4002 employee ID. For record 3, we're moving over to 1947. Be sure you're getting the correct employee ID and the correct project ID, because like I said earlier, it will create problems, and just trust me, I had 3 or 4 students who had issues with it in class. then you have to go find that error, and it's easier to just make sure you don't make the error in the first place by moving just a little slower. If you can't go as fast as me, that's fine. That's the nice thing about this video is you can pause it, rewind it, whatever you need to do. Okay, so I have 11 records, 1 through 11. Okay, make sure you're in this new record row here because we're moving to step 4 on page 167. We're going to insert a total row. The way you do that is in this records group, click totals. We get a totals row. And there's functions in each one of these fields. We're going to be in the amount field. So when you click in that, we get this drop down arrow. And we're going to choose sum because the book tells us we're going to add this column of information. That's all we need to do. We get $2,854.29. We can now close this expenses table, say yes to save. Okay, step 6, we're creating some relationships. Click the database tools. You've done this before. Click relationships. Remember, you have to have these tables closed in order for the relationships to work. So if you have some tables open, you need to close them. So hopefully you're following along with the steps I'm giving you. That's the purpose of this. So click the relationships, database tools, relationships. The first relationship tells us to create a one-to-many relationship where employee ID in the employees table is the one and the employee ID in the expenses table is the many. Enforce referential integrity and cascade fields and records. I'm on step number 6. So I need the employees and expenses tables. So employees, expenses. Now I'm going to click close. I'm going to expand my employees table. I don't need to, but I'm going to just to show you that how to, just as a refresher, because this will appear on your test. You will have to create relationships on your test, so it's important that you know how to do this. So we're starting with the employee IDs in the employees table, that's the one. And we're going to the employee IDs in the expenses table, which is the many. This box comes up, we're going to choose the 3 options here and click create. If you get an error message at that point, that is because you have an error in either your employees table or your expenses table, and you have to go find that by looking at every single record that you've typed in, finding out where you typed something incorrectly. Okay, step 7 says to create a one-to-many relationship where the employee ID in the employees table is the one and the employee ID in the projects table is the many. Well, we don't have the projects table listed in our relationships, but it's easy to get. We can click the show table with this plus sign, and that's the way I did it on purpose so I could show you. You can still get any table you want, which we only have 3. So once we add projects, we have all the tables we need. So add projects, close, and it tells us the employee IDs in the employees table to the employee ID in the projects table. That's the one-to-many. Enforce and cascade. Then step 8 tells to create a one-to-many relationship where the project ID in the projects table is the one and the project ID in the expenses table is the many. Enforce referential integrity and cascade fields and records. I'm going to move these just so I can see all 3. I've created 3 relationships, 3 one-to-many relationships. Now I need to create what's called a relationship report. And we've done this very easy. I simply click the relationship report button. It creates the report for me. Basically, it's just a printout of those relationships. So I could easily print this if I needed to at this point in time. Now I'm going to close that. It's going to ask me to save it. It gives me a name, and this is the name that I want. 9 times out of 10, actually it's more like 99 times out of 100, this name will be correct. But every once in a great while, I have a student who has something else in here. So this should be the name. Click OK. And also close our relationships. They save. You don't have to worry. Okay, we're ready for step number 10, which is creating some queries. We're going to create 4 queries. These are pretty easy. I don't care if you use the query wizard or if you do it in design view, but if you use the wizard, you need to know how to use it because I don't go through the wizard method in this chapter. So I'm going to use the design view. So create query design. It tells me in step 10A, to insert the employees table in the query window. So employees is the table I'm choosing, close. It then goes on to tell me in step B to insert the employee ID, the first name, the last name, and the status from this employees table. So I have 4 fields I've added to my query. Now we're going to hide the employee ID field. So we're going to use it for data, but we don't want to show it in our query. So we're going to deselect the check mark in the employee ID field. So just click that so the check mark goes away. Now we're going to extract all full-time employees. So in the status field, in the criteria row, you're going to type in quotation marks, full-time. Be sure you capitalize the F because we did that when we created our list. So I've typed full-time in quotes. I'm going to run my query. Now remember, I can change to datasheet view or run. They both do the same thing. I have 6 records of employees who are full-time status. And it's only showing my first name, last name, and the status itself. They should all be full-time. Rosa Martinez should not show up in here. She was our only part-time employee. Okay, go ahead and close this query. Say yes to save it. The name is in step 10E. I never put the word query after it because it puts it in a query grouping over here, so I know that's a query. Okay, step 11, we're creating another query, so query design. 11A says employees table and projects table are the 2 tables we're using for this query. And the fields we're using out of each table, we're using the employee IDs from the employees table, the first name and the last name, all from the employees table, and then the project ID from the projects table. It tells us in step 11D to extract those projects managed by employee number 1947. So in the employee ID criteria group, in quotation marks, type 1947. The reason why we have to put the quotes around that is because we use that as text. We're not using it to calculate anything. There's no operand involved. So that's why we need to put that in quotes. Often, there are times when it would do it automatically, but just to be safe, just put it in quotes. You cannot go wrong if it's in quotes. So now let's run our query. I'm going to change it to datasheet view. We have 2. Brandon Byrne is managing 2 different projects. He's the employee 1947 and he's managing project 10A and 10B. Let's close this query and name it in step 11E. Moving on to 12, we're creating a new query. So query design. 12A tells us the expenses and employees tables are the 2 tables being used. I'm going to choose expenses first, then employees. If you accidentally already added them in the other way, it's okay. You just have to know which table you're using when you pull your fields out. So from the expenses table, we're using item ID, amount, and date submitted. From the employees table, we're using first name, last name. It tells us in step 12D to hide the item ID field. So we've done that before, so go ahead and just check that box for item ID so the check mark goes away. And now step 12E, we are extracting expenses over $250. So in the amount field, in the criteria row, you put a greater than 250. So any amount that's greater than 250 is what we're going to see. Run your query. We have 5 records, but all of the amounts are greater than 250. Now, it didn't tell us equal to or over 250. It just said over 250. So that's why we don't see any that are equal to 250. There may not be any. All right, so let's close this query. We're saving it. step 12F, expenses over $250. And then our very last query tells us to use the employees and expenses table. By the way, if you accidentally add a table that you didn't want, so let me go to show table, and let's say that I add an extra employees table. Notice it says employees _1. I can right click on that and I can remove that table because I don't want it. But if it's in there, it's probably not hurting anything as long as you don't use any fields from it. So just be aware of that. Okay, step 13B says, in the employees table, we're using employee ID, first name, last name. From the expenses table, we're using project ID, amount, date submitted. Turn the page to 168. Please make sure you follow this in this order. I had a student who tried to do this. He tried to work ahead and it kind of created some problems. So please make sure you're following it in these steps. So we're going to click in the checkbox to hide the employee ID column. But we're going to extract records from that employee ID column. Please make sure your check mark is removed before you put the criteria in, and the criteria is 1947 because it tells us extract those expenses submitted by employee number 1947. I put it in quotes, run your query. We know that Brandon Byrne is our employee 1947. His project 10A has 2 expenses charged to it. And so if you get those amounts, you're correct. Close your query and name it in 13F. Okay, now we're moving on to assessment number 4. We're going to open the employees table. We are going to skip step 5 in here because we don't have those employees listed. So we're opening the employees table. We're going to change to design view. Our zip code field is going to have an input mask. Now we've not done an input mask for zip code before, but we're going to now. So make sure you're in the zip field, go down to input mask, click on your ellipses, choose zip code. Next, choose the top option because we want the dash to show up, finish. Go back to datasheet view. Yes, we want to save. Okay, we are adding 2 new records to the very bottom here in step 6. So 2286, and notice my status, this happened to me last time. My status field did not stay where I wanted it to stay. It should be before title. So I'm going to have to move it again. You don't have to type the dash in the zip code. You just type the numbers, just like in the phone number. Saves us some time. Okay, so once you have those 2 records, you can close this. If it asks you to save, say yes. When you're finished, you should have 3 tables, 4 queries, 1 report. Make sure that your little save icon is not blue. If it's not, you're good. That means you have everything saved. You can close this. Now you're going to go to OneDrive, which is very weird why my OneDrive is not showing. Usually it's one of my commonly used tabs. So on OneDrive, you're going to go to your BUS 235 folder. I cannot stress this enough. I found today several students who have things saved outside of that BUS 235 folder. All of these things right here, I would not be able to see. So if they're files for me, they need to be inside this BUS 235 folder. If not, I can't grade them and you get a 0. So you click on BUS 235 and then you upload. You may already have a Hudson file in here, and I'm going to show you what to do. We need to upload this new one. So click upload, make sure nothing is checked. Click upload, go navigate to your downloads folder, choose the Hudson database. It tells me one item wasn't uploaded. We've done this several times, but I still have people with questions, so I'm going over it again. Click this one item wasn't uploaded with this red X, choose replace. The new file must be here. It should say a few seconds ago. That's the newest one. So you're done. And that is all that there is to do. On Thursday, there is a speaker at 11 o'clock. I'll send it in an email. Thank you. Have a great afternoon.